The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist, but we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you within a cannon shot of historic Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I thank you for joining me. Now tonight, I welcome Phantoms and Monsters Fortean research investigators Tobias, Wayland, and Manuel Navarette to Arcane Radio. Now, Tobias, Manuel, and I have been investigating this Chicago, Lake Michigan Mothman phenomenon now, well, together, I guess, since 2017, but Manuel and I have both been looking into this since the 2011 sightings. And, then again, when the influx of these sightings began in early 2017, then Tobias came aboard with the team. So, these encounters continue to occur, which is interesting because I got a phone call from a supposed sighting at O'Hara tonight, just before the show. I got to call the guy back. So, since they keep occurring, but with the new variations and descriptions that need to be documented, researched, and investigated, it keeps us busy. So to this date, we have well over 100 incidents that we have deemed credible. So Tobias and Manuel, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, guys, I guess we ought to start from the beginning. For those who don't really know what or have any idea what this is, though I don't know if that's possible. But Manuel, why don't you tell us about the three sightings in 2011 and kind of set the stage for what's been going on?
Well, the initial sighting started with a pair of young ladies that were students at University of Illinois, Chicago, UIC. And if you don't know that whole area, it's like just this huge campus. It makes up an entire neighborhood. Not only do you have the campus and the dorms and everything, but you have a lot of off-dorm or off-site apartment buildings and satellite buildings that are around that area. And they lived in an apartment building. They were up on the third floor, and they had just gotten home, and they were getting ready to go out for the night. They were going to go enjoy the evening out. And as they were getting ready, one of the girls who was in her room getting dressed said that she saw something in the mirror. She turned around, and she came face to face with something with glowing red eyes staring back at her. And she basically, for lack of a better word, freaked, started screaming, and was just completely petrified. When the roommate ran into the room, she found her cowering in a corner, just like trying to make herself as small as possible. She described to her friend that she felt like a rabbit about to be pounced on by an owl. And she said that it just looked at her, and it's like it looked straight through her. And she just got this feeling like she was about to become prey. So the girl says, I looked out the window, and there's nothing. There's a 30-foot drop straight down to the courtyard below. So whatever it is was probably, latched onto the building or something, or a sill. But she saw nothing, and she took her friend out to the living room, and they she tried to console her. She went back into her room to get something, and that's when she saw it. It was back. It was staring at her, and she said the same thing. It felt like it was ready to go through the window and pounce at her at any second. She just had overwhelming fear. She also freaked out. Um, they are both in hysterics now. Coincidentally, her boyfriend and his friend were on their way to their apartment, and they were passing through a park that's nearby, and they said they saw a winged creature that was perched. They said was a perched on a basketball goal, and that the thing had taken off, and they could see it in the air. About this time, they call the girls, and the girls are like going hysterical. Um, they're screaming, out loud, and the boyfriend and the friend run to the apartment, and it's just that's where the whole story kind of comes together. They said that they had to. The police actually showed up because I guess the neighbors thought there was something going on, and they had to tell them that no, they saw something in the window. Um, they said they had to kind of dismiss the police because they didn't want anything to happen. Um, but they said that it freaked them out so much that they didn't even leave that night. They stayed in the whole weekend. Um, and they said that they had all the windows drawn, all the curtains were drawn. Um, I believe it's about a week or so later, they had a gentleman who was from, I believe it was New Zealand or Australia, that was a student at UIC that also was in that same park and saw a winged humanoid fly over. He described it as a large sugar glider, which was an animal that's native to his land. But if you've ever seen a sugar glider, um, kind of help me out here a little bit. They're about the size of the palm of your hand.
Yeah, they're quite small.
Yeah, they're tiny little things. But they have that membranous wing that extends from their hands down to their legs, and they spread it out when they fly. But this thing was much, much, much bigger. He said it was silent. He said it had glowing red eyes, and that was basically it. Those three sightings all happened in 2011.
Yeah, I think it was from August, September, and in October that we had one in each of those 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you and I had discussed this when it first started coming up. Of course, the well-known photograph of the one gliding above the old Indian statue that used to sit there. What was that, Pulaski? Was that all Pulaski Avenue?
That's right off of Pulaski.
It was.
Yeah. And, that photograph, really, I still don't know what the hell that thing was. That was, and it's hard to tell what size was. The wing structure was unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
I have an opinion on what that is, actually, that Emily helped me out with.
What's
you guys remember, it was last year sometime, I believe, there was a photograph circulating around the internet briefly of, somebody who said that they had, captured a picture of, maybe Mothman in Chicago. I think it was Lollapalooza last year. And, we got the image, we blew it up, and it was a monarch butterfly.
Really?
Yeah, and that's something that, Emily spends a lot of time on. She actually raises monarchs here, as part of the effort to rehabilitate the species. And so she raises monarchs and black swallowtails, and it's something she's really into. And so after that happened, and that was positively identified, we went back and looked at that Pulaski photograph, and it's the right shape to be something like a question mark butterfly, which is a specific type of butterfly. And reading that account, the guy says, well, he took 3 photos, and the creature shows up only in the second, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made a lot of sense to me because he didn't see it at the time. It was only later after he had taken this picture, right?
Yeah.
And he went and looked at it, and he was like, "Well, what the hell is that?" And so it made a lot of sense to me that if it was something like a butterfly, it could have flown, relatively close to him, in front of him, zipped past him. He gets it in only one photograph, doesn't see it at the time, goes back later, and because of forced perspective, with the statue right there, it easily could be mistaken for something big and far away.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that does make sense. We really haven't been able to figure out what that really was just by the shape. And you mentioned, it does have the profile of a butterfly. It was kind of stretched out without flapping its wings. So
Right.
Very possible. Very possible.
I remember some of the protractors saying, "Oh, it's a specific kind of kite."
Kite, yeah.
Eyes. And the thing is a kite that high in the city. Plus,
where would you fly it from? It's all.
Not only that, I went back and checked the wind speeds in that part in Chicago that day, and the highest recorded wind was 2 miles an hour. It was still.
Yeah. So I'm not afraid of a skeptical explanation, but that kite, that hypothesis always struck me as just lazy and dismissive.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of lazy and dismissive during this whole investigation. I mean, MUFON's been trying to shoot us down from the very beginning, though and for people who don't know, those first 3 sightings came from MUFON. I mean, they were actually reported to MUFON. And then in 2017, I believe the first 3 or 4 actually came through MUFON as well.
Mm-hmm.
Though Manuel was able to track down one of the witnesses at Oz Park. And then, of course, Billy Bance contacted me later about an earlier sighting, which had gone and he had seen in March, not far from, he was out in Cicero. So, this, and quite frankly, and we have gotten older reports between 2011 and 2017 since we've been doing this investigation. So it's not like there hasn't been sightings, between 2011 and 2017. There has been, but people just haven't come forth. So, but of course now since, we've been reporting on this, people seem less afraid to come forward on these sightings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure. We filled in quite a bit of the timeline, honestly. Really, even just looking from say those initial reports from 2011, between 2017, then when those 3 MUFON reports came in, there are a significant number of sightings that have been reported in that time period since this investigation began, largely from people who, saw that finally there was a place they could go to actually report these things where somebody would take them seriously.
Somebody had asked in the chat room about if there had been Mothman sightings before the Point Pleasant Mothman. Well, quite frankly, there have been. And, they weren't publicized. Now, I don't think they were in the area around Point Pleasant, but that in West Virginia, even all of the Appalachians have a strange history of winged beings. I will tell you this. If you want to get a good history of it, Small Town Monsters is going to be releasing a film entitled Mothman Legacy. And I got the preview, and I know Tobias has the preview as well.
Yeah.
And it's very in-depth. It tells a lot about the folklore, the history, and some of the phenomena that has happened in and around the Appalachian, particularly, in West Virginia and up and down the Ohio River Valley. And God knows we've gotten a lot of crazy stuff the whole way through the Ohio River Valley. So, it's and plus it's got a lot of indigenous history as well. So yeah, so I just wanted to mention that. So if you take when that comes out, and I think it's coming out
end of October, I think.
Okay, yeah, I know because I was going to write a review on it, but I think they want to hold off on it until it's out.
Yeah, Seth told me the same thing. I was all ready to do it this week, but
well,
you also have to think that whole area, the Ohio River Valley, the Appalachia, they have a rich Native American history, and basically the whole U.S. Almost every American tribe, even the Inuits, have reports or stories of winged beings. They've called them by many names like Thunderbirds, the Harpies, the different, but they've all had some kind of winged humanoid um, sighting or a report or a story. And so, those things had to have come from somewhere. There's a basis, even, mythology, there's always somewhere very, very far down the line of truth of, a grain of truth. There's something that might have started, a myth, but, there's a lot throughout the entire world of winged humanoids. So, to say that this is something that's recent is, it's just false. I mean, this is something that's been going on for possibly centuries, maybe millennium, before we even knew about it.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah, but the upper Midwest has had, oh my God, it's had centuries worth of flying cryptid reports, winged cryptid reports, and all that comes from the native people that had lived there. Mm-hmm. And it is quite astounding when you start hearing some of the history about it. Now, as far as what we've been investigating, I don't know. I don't know how to classify it even after all this time. I mean, I think there's a strong possibility that it's an interdimensional being of some type, though I believe it is flesh and blood. I think it's corporal. But I do believe it has some abilities to move in and out of realities. Now, that's a guess to me. I mean, as far as what I believe it is, just by some of the information we've gotten, but by no way is it a positive, a positive theory. It's we've had people have seen these things literally disappear, and we have had multiple sightings as far as time period goes at in different places around the same time. So the fact that most of them did start in the Chicago area, it has kind of branched out, and it's kind of encompassed 4 different states, if you include Michigan, 4 different states now. So,
and the thing about it is because it's in the Chicago area, that's what makes it so unique, because all of the conventional explanations can't apply here. When we had the first sightings, that after those 3 initial ones that kicked off in 2017, we had the Columbus Bridge sighting, and the one where the lady saw 2 of them kind of doing figure 8s amongst with each other at the marina there on the lakefront.
All right.
And I remember the first thing I heard from MUFON, that's a guy in a wingsuit.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a squirrel suit. So I went out and found somebody who was an expert, and I showed them, like, okay, here's the Columbus Bridge, the Columbus Avenue Bridge. Can I fly under it, around it, and go around? He's like, that's suicide. Yeah. It's like, you're basically a wingsuit. You're not in flight. It's a controlled fall at speeds well in excess of 100 miles an hour. It's like, you're not going to be doing figure 8s with each other, because if you miscalculate even by a microsecond, you will collide with each other at high speeds. That if that impact doesn't kill you, the fall will. And if you try it anywhere in a city, you are going to end up splattered against, a bridge or a building. And on top of the fact, the Chicago lakefront is a no-fly zone, other than for law enforcement and the Coast Guard, and it is heavily patrolled.
Mm-hmm.
And you pull a stunt like that, they would be waiting for you when you landed. Wherever you were, they would be waiting uh, to arrest you. We had an incident about, I want to say it's about 10 years ago, when they were building one of the skyscrapers in Chicago. Uh, Two gentlemen climbed one of the tower cranes and base jumped it. They were arrested within, I believe, an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And it was captured on 4 or 5 different video cameras, surveillance cameras, and people just seeing. They said that when the parachutes opened, it's just the audible whoosh to be heard for blocks. When they open, they have a pop to them,
Mm-hmm.
and that resonated. That just attracted people's attention. Now that's two base jumpers in the middle of the night. Imagine somebody in broad daylight doing this with a wingsuit. um, it's going to be all over the news. Um, you know, Probably, the Channel 7 News at 6 o'clock showed them scraping them off a building or off a bridge. But, I mean, that kind of a stunt would be, it was impossible. And I just loved how some of these explanations, the kite, a wingsuit, a drone, on top of the fact, the Billy Bass ones, I believe, were the drones, um, because he was right by Midway.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, "Oh, it's a drone. It's a drone." No, he was literally across the street from a major airport. Um, they will not let you fly a drone in that area. Um, I mean, imagine the consequences. One of those drones got sucked up into an engine of a jet that was taken off. Uh, you know, it would bring down a large drone would bring down one of those engines.
Oh, people
Uh,
could die. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that'd be hell to pay for that.
yeah. So just the normal explanations are so they're just thrown out, immediately because of the area and the environment you're talking. So that's what makes it so unique. On top of the fact, this is the third largest city in the nation. I mean, just I live in Melrose Park, which is a suburb, and I could draw a circle, a 1 mile circle, and I can guarantee there's at least close to 1 million people around me. Um, it's a densely populated area that's active. Even now with COVID, there's still people out and about, uh,
Mm-hmm.
especially along the lakefront.
Right.
And for these things that be happening and happening on such a regular basis, it's just it makes it unique, and that's what also gives it a good investigative perspective because all of the normal explanations go out the window because of the environment you're dealing with.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, like if I could just add on a little bit to the so-called early skeptical explanations. I mean, what was so frustrating about those to me is because again, like I don't mind a mundane explanation if that's what we land on, but we weren't talking about, investigators out there talking to people, really doing good investigation. They were literally just dismissive explanations that were seemingly just like the first thing that they thought of, and then they decided without really investigating that that's what it had to be, so that's what it was.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the problem with this, and especially MUFON. Yeah, MUFON got these reports initially, and I think it kind of chapped their butts when they found out somebody else was actually making some headway into these investigations, and they did nothing. They had no intention of even looking into these sightings.
Right.
And I think that's a big reason why we got a lot of pushback.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And just some of I mean, Tobias is right. They were grasping at straws. You're just throwing up on the wall, see what they could stick. I believe the one we were on a show, or I was on a show with a MUFON investigator. I believe you guys were uh, listening in with me because we were all talking. But
Right.
the one the one sighting, I believe, was the second of the trio, where she saw it over the lake, and then they saw a light afterwards on the horizon.
The green light. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, that was a freighter. That was a freighter at night." I was like, "No, a freighter's huge, and I've seen the ships that go up and down the lakefront going toward the ports. They're huge. They're ocean-going vessels. They're huge. From stem to stern are lit up. You know, because people are working. It's a 24-hour facility, and it's completely lit up. And then there are also like certain laws that say you have to have this amount of lighting. And how could they say there's one green orb and say that was a freighter? That was his explanation. That was a freighter. The one with I believe Humboldt Park, that was probably somebody in a costume. I live in the Chicago area, and Humboldt Park, although it's changed in the last few years, it used to be one of the worst neighborhoods. You would not go running around in a suit in the middle of the night in that area without risking yourself to be shot. But I mean, these people saw something on the ground, and they were right. And the first thing that would come to mind, that was the first thing that came to mind when I heard the story was, lechuza.
Right.
Because we all grew up with those stories. That's what the stories that my grandmother used to use to scare us, into behaving. So if you don't behave, the lechuza are going to come for you tonight. So, but, what was the other one? The one about the Chicago, in the International Fruit Market. Oh, how would
The
they
produce
know?
market, yeah.
I think the initial one was like, how could someone see it? It was like 2:00 in the morning. No one was around. I was like, no, I work in trucking. That place is active 24/7, especially more at night because everyone's showing up to pick up loads that have to be delivered the next morning. So they're all there, and this thing was seen by multiple people, and yet no one bothered to go out there. No one bothered to go out there and interview anybody out there in that area. I think one person did, but when they went out there, it was during the middle of the day. So she's asking the completely wrong people.
Absolutely.
Oh, what happened last night? I don't know. I just came out of shift at 6:00 in the morning. So, unless it was something major that I saw on the news, I wouldn't know.
We got a question, which I think is pretty relevant. If there's any chance that what we're seeing in and around Chicago is related to the Mothman from Point Pleasant. Well, in my opinion, no. I have said for quite a while now that I believe that the Point Pleasant Mothman was a summoned being. And now I'm not saying that these creatures in Chicago area or Lake Michigan area are not summoned beings, but the whole body structure, wing structure was quite different than what's being reported to us. In fact, I mean, this Mothman looked like a moth, basically. Though it was humanoid, it had the moth wings or butterfly type wings. It did have the big red eyes, though they were set further down into the body. It actually had a body that was somewhat more substantial than what they're seeing out in Chicago. And it did seem to be somewhat aggressive. I believe it was there to protect whatever spirit was around that TNT area or the West Virginia Ordnance Works. I do believe it was a summoned being, like a sentinel or a guardian, and I do believe that's it's much different than what's being seen. Now we've had winged humanoid sightings in other places as well, and quite frankly, very few. Well, let's put it this way: many more are much different than what we're seeing at Point Pleasant. Now,
sure,
there is definitely a difference. So no, I don't believe it's related any way to what was seen out in Point Pleasant.
Now, this is one of the rare occasions where I think Lon and I disagree somewhat, because I do think there's some connection. I mean, I went back, and of course I reread the Mothman prophecies and looked at some of the old accounts and stuff, and you see some variation in the eyewitness accounts from the 66 to 67 flap in West Virginia. And people do use descriptors like a giant bird fang with red eyes. You know what I mean? And so like there is that similarity that exists. Now, definitely not all or even most of the Lake Michigan sightings match exactly, what people were describing in Point Pleasant, but some of them do. Like some of them definitely do. At least some of the sightings, because again there was some variation, between witnesses, which is exactly what you would expect. That always happens. And so like that combined with the general experience that people describe, like there's this sort of specific narrative of people being out doing something relatively innocuous, whether it's hanging out in an old TNT area with your friends, or hanging out in the park in Chicago or something, where they're just out going about their business and they run headlong into this winged being that scares the crap out of them. And they report this almost like supernatural fear. And so that's another connection that's really stuck with me. And so I don't know that it's the same creature, but I think
that's what I meant. I don't think it's the same creature, basically.
Oh, sure, yeah. I just think it's at least related in the way that I think these things come from the same place, kind of. Like they operate on the same level.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think they're definitely beings from another reality. I do believe. Now, but why all these sightings in the Chicago area? I don't know. That's something we just haven't been able to figure out why they are showing up. Why, what's the reason for it?
That's a great question.
We may never figure that out.
Right.
So, I just believe that, well, just like more recently, we've been getting these sightings in and around the O'Hare International Airport since October 1st, actually. And Manuel's been out there. He's been investigating. He actually saw something as well. But, like, why is this happening out there? I mean, we do have a UFO report that may actually be related to it. The person did see some type of humanoid or being ascend into the UFO, but not enough evidence to believe that it was a winged being, though, we don't know. There was a sighting in Rosemont where an alien type being was seen in the presence of this thing, as well as two female, possibly humanoids, possibly some type of extraterrestrial. And, in the presence, there was a blue flash of light. The alien and the two females suddenly disappeared, and this winged being took off and flew away. That sighting as well had almost like an MIB, Men in Black experience with it, where somebody came up to the witness and wanted her to tell them about it, though there was no way they got any information from us, because we had just started talking. Well, not even talking to her. We had just started communicating with her, and we hadn't said a thing to anybody. So there are a lot of variables that are going on, basically. And I mean, and a lot of this stuff has only been going on now since October. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, and this other thing that we got recently with the humanoid, possible humanoid seen behind the convention center back there in Rosemont. Well, that area had, these preservation areas seem to be quite active with these humanoids. That isn't the first time we've heard that.
Oh, we had the one in Schiller Woods.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they actively said they were there to do a Wiccan ritual, and I know for a fact, I myself am pagan, and I have quite a lot of friends in the community. They go out to the preserve because it's quiet, no one's going to bother you, and for the most part, everyone just leaves you alone, and you can go in there and pretty much get away from everybody, and still be within walking distance of a car or whatever. And yeah, a lot of places you go out there and you will see a lot of little impromptu altars that have been made, or little where they've had a fire going or something. So, and they said in that sighting that they were out there to do a ritual, and they were in the middle of a ritual when the sighting happened.
Mm-hmm. See, that's not the only pagan connection we have, too, because I talked to a witch in Chicago, had to be back in 2017, 2018, and she talked about how just before all of this stuff started happening, like the 2017 stuff started happening, she had been out with her girlfriend along the shore of Lake Michigan, and they had performed this summoning ritual. It was a blood moon that night, and they wanted to sort of try to open a door to the other world. And as a result, she said that she had this sort of ecstatic vision, for lack of a better term, where she saw what appeared to be these bat creatures coming out of this sort of portal as a result of conducting this ritual. So, I mean, I don't know how that might be connected, but it certainly seems suspicious, if nothing else. It seems like it could be connected in some way.
Well, another thing, we had 9 sightings in the little village area. And of course, that's a highly Hispanic neighborhood, a lot of different beliefs there, possibly Santa Muerto or even something else.
Yeah, you have people there in that area who practice Santeria, they practice Brujeria, they practice Curandera. A lot of those places do deal with summoning, and in fact, interesting fact, a lechuza is a summoned creature.
Right.
It's summoned to do the work of the witch, or a witch who's transformed themselves, and it is very, very prominent in Little Village. You could take a drive down the middle of Little Village, down the main drag, and pass at least a dozen botanicas, which are just stores that cater toward brujeria, santeria, curandera, folk remedies.
Right.
Plus, there's also a burgeoning religious group there that's kind of taken based on La Santa Muerte, that also deals with witchcraft.
I think we're going to have to eventually look into a lot of that a little more. Though I don't think we've had any sightings in that neighborhood for almost 2 years now, I think. But, I think with all this different type of summoning and, whatever has been going on, maybe this is a conglomerate type thing. I mean, all this energy kind of coming together and opening up some type of doorway to this thing. I mean, and we've had other theories as well. Of course, people keep telling me they believe that, and I think Tobias believes a lot that it's possibly a water connection. If you look at the map and the location of the Des Plaines River, that thing runs right along the eastern side of O'Hara International into Rosemont, and there's several preserves north of that where we have had sightings. That river runs right through. So, I mean, is the possibility that that may be involved as well? So I don't know.
Sure. I mean, there's a couple different things I think could be going on with water. I mean, water has long been associated with paranormal phenomena, you know, but on a more mundane tack, you know, some of these sightings, like you look at like Pilsen, for instance, like the Pilsen sighting where the guy, you know, had his GoPro camera on his helmet while he was bicycling to work and saw something, you know, strange in the sky and managed to film it. And the end result of that film and being able to get some stills out of it and blow those up was that it was a large bird. He was just mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how many of the you know, sort of water-based or water-adjacent sightings that lack the paranormal aspects of the other sightings are just misidentified birds. You know, because there are some sightings where there's really nothing spectacular about them.
Right.
It's just, you know, somebody has seen something that they couldn't identify very quickly. You know, and so they don't have any of the fear or associated paranormal phenomena or, you know, any of that associated with them to make me think that they're anything more special. So it could be that some of them, or that it appears as though there's more sightings near water because some of them are, you know, these you know, herons and cranes and things that live by water. But again, like there is definitely a strong paranormal association with water. And, you know, like if you track UFO reports, for instance, like there's always a ton of them above water, like the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, you know, I'm sure Manuel could talk all about that. You know, like there is for whatever reason, this strong association with this anomalous activity and water sources.
You know, I think it's also important to note some of the witnesses that we have received reports from over the past 4 years. We've had airline pilots. We've had 2 of those. We've had security people out of O'Hara. One was with the TSA at least. We had a well-decorated fire rescue captain who saw one in Milwaukee. We've had 2 local celebrities contact us. Well, one was a local celebrity with the sighting down in Indiana, and then we had the sighting along the waterfront on the lakefront by a professional sports figure from Washington D.C. area who was in Chicago visiting his mother-in-law. You know, we are getting reports, and also the police officers within Chicago itself. We've had several of those, and we've talked to several of those.
Well, and and some of them have gone on the record too. Like David Ramos is an ex-police officer from Chicago, and he's willing to go on the record. He put himself out there, and was willing to talk about his experience. So there are people who feel strongly enough about their experience that, you know, they're willing to put themselves out there.
Yeah, I just don't think a lot of people realize the range of people that have been making these reports. Even the woman who worked in the mayor's office in Chicago, she saw it as well and made the report. You know, we have had quite a range of witnesses from all parts of the city, all parts of the suburbs, and, you know, and it's something that kind of makes me chuckle every time I hear people question it. You know, why are we getting all the reports? Well, we're getting the reports because I wouldn't say we're soliciting the reports, but when somebody goes on Google and starts putting in winged humanoid or flying humanoid or flying man or bat, we're going to come up.
Right.
So then that's why we get the reports.
Well, the other part of that too is like, I'm sorry, did I miss something? Is there somebody else like taking these seriously and helping people and really investigating them?
No.
You know what I mean? Like that's the other part of it. Of course we're getting them. Like we're the ones investigating them.
I mean, it seems the only other people involved are those that are trying to disprove it or are skeptics.
Well, the people who just lazily dismiss it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think, Manuel? What do you got to say about that?
Well, I mean, we put ourselves out there. You know, not only do we, like UFO Clearinghouse is currently having this summer push to try to get more sightings. So I've been putting up little cards, flyers. I've been going to almost every group I'm on ad nauseum in Facebook and Reddit, and even on a few other places. Putting out there, have you seen something? Call. Tobias does the same thing. You do the same thing. We're not just sitting back, kind of like other investigators. Just riding the coattails of others. We're out there actually physically soliciting, these things. When we were doing the investigations during the string of sightings during the little village, I was giving people my information. I was telling them, I speak Spanish. I'm going to be here for you. And one of the things like they were, they were afraid because they have this thing about, especially in a Hispanic community, if you talk about it, you'll resummon it, or it'll hear it and it'll come back. Or they were afraid that someone was going to take this and report this to the authorities. And I'm like, I'm not here to do that. I'm here to investigate something. If you know something, feel free. I will keep your your identity to myself, anonymous. And that's another thing that skeptics have really just jumped on. Oh, release information. I'm not going to release the information of somebody who's asked me to, to remain anonymous. These people have families. They have, jobs. The last thing they need to do is somebody to release this information and say, hey, Joe Blow from so-and-so address, this isn't the police blotter. I'm here to investigate, and what's funny about it is the detractors who are screaming about, we don't release information, we don't give out witness information or contact information. I don't see MUFON doing the same thing.
MUFON won't even give you the results of their investigations.
MUFON will not share anything. So why are you coming at me? That's the pot calling the kettle black.
Right.
We do it because we're protecting our the witnesses. I'm not also. I don't see MUFON doing the same thing. So why should you be citing that? Oh, well, they're not doing this. We're not getting information off of MUFON when the initial sightings happened, or when the sighting that happened in Rosemont with the rideshare driver. Yeah. He couldn't get anything done with MUFON because MUFON was like, oh, we want all this information. We want you to go on the record, on camera, with all your information. And the gentleman was like, we all talk amongst each other. I'm not putting myself out there. Because...
Well, that's how we got him, because he contacted us then.
Right, I remember that.
I mean, and he was pissed. I mean, he was really... That letter he sent us, he was really upset with the way he was treated by MUFON.
Right.
And, Billy out in Cicero was the same way. He was upset. So, I don't know.
It's understandable. And we're not unreasonable people. Like I have, on behalf of interested parties, reached out to witnesses and asked them if they'd be willing to speak to other people, and sometimes they're willing to, and sometimes they're not. A lot of the time, people just want to put this behind them.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Let's get into a few specific cases. First of all, now the other night, Tobias and I were on with Joe Mataldo, and we were talking about a few cases and such, but we mentioned Manuel's, what he saw out at O'Hara. So why don't you explain that, Manuel?
Well, I was on my way into work. I was on Mannheim Road, which is a very large road that skirts the entire length of O'Hare. And I was coming up to an intersection. It's actually the first intersection as you come off because there's no stoplights as you skirt around the entire length of O'Hare. So this was the first light, and I'm on the phone with my wife. We're just discussing, the day ahead and what we have to do and some other stuff. And when you get to the light, there's at this intersection, there used to be just vacant lots. There's a vacant lot on your left-hand side, but across the street there used to be an old Enterprise facility where the Enterprise rent-a-car. They moved that now to the other side of the airport, and on the other side, on the right side now is in front of me would have been office buildings, and across the street they built a new parking garage for the airport, and it's now the new hub where the monorail comes in. So I'm sitting there talking, and I see something catches my eye, and I look up, and where the Enterprise building was, something was landing on top of it, and I'm telling my wife, "Hey, man, something's landing. Look at this." She's joking around. Oh, it's probably Mothman. My wife has been there with me every step of the way, and she's had to listen to me talk about it ad nauseum. So sometimes she'll joke about it. But the thing was, at first she was like, maybe it's just a goose, because this was about the time the geese were starting to show up. And I'm like, no, this does not look like a goose. It's much larger than a goose, and it also looks like, how can I describe it? The way I describe it to you guys is, if you ever play D&D or Dungeons and Dragons, they have a picture of an imp. It looks like a little demon, with these bat-like wings, and it has like the leathery skin. Well, this is what it looked like, except much larger. I didn't get to see really the head, but I got to see the chest and the wings as it was coming in, and then it flew behind the building. And it's one of those buildings that I later found out it has the roof, but the roof kind of sunken in. So there's like the wall itself kind of forms a barrier all the way around. There's a lip at the building. So anything that lands on it would probably be sitting 2 feet lower than, if not flush with the roof. So I immediately turned around. I was in the middle of a 4-lane highway, so I couldn't just U-turn, because didn't want to get into an accident, didn't want to get pulled over by the police. But I went around, there was a hotel right down the street. I turned around, came right back in. I started just circling the area, able to drive up onto the property. It's now used by O'Hare to store compressors and generators and stuff like that they have. Took a bunch of pictures, and I believe I was on the phone with you guys, or I was texting it to you guys as this was happening. But I wasn't able to see anything else, but I decided to get out of there, because the last thing I needed to do was security come by and see me there and ask if I was authorized to be in that area, because I was actually in the property itself. But it looked literally just like it was a winged creature, but the head was not, I didn't really see the head. Mm-hmm. So I saw the chest, and when it was coming in, it kind of had its wings were up and flapping, but they were kind of arced up, kind of like when you see a bird as it's landing, they kind of have their chest puffed up a little bit, and their wings are kind of arched because they're kind of flaring before they hit the ground. This is what it looked like, except there was no feathers. It was a lot else. I'd say about twice, maybe 3 times the size of a Canadian goose, and they're pretty big. And the wings were leathery and almost kind of segmented. That's why I said when I showed you the picture of the imp, it has that segmented wing, but that's what it looked like.
Tobias, why don't you tell us which one of these cases or 2 are your favorites?
Oh boy. So, picking out of the entire pantheon of cases here. Well, probably if I had to pick, two specifically, I guess I would go with the two that Emily and I really were able to dig into the best. I felt so. The mid-April 2017 McGuanago, Wisconsin case, and then the sightings in Woodstock. And what I liked about both of those, I mean, I can go through both kind of
Sure.
Individually, but I mean, really, like what they had in common for me was our ability to meet with the witnesses, meet on site, be shown the sighting areas, and really dig into them. So mid-April 2017, there was a sighting in McGuanago, Wisconsin. So anybody who's not familiar with that, it's about 45 minutes outside of Milwaukee. And if you're not familiar with Wisconsin, basically, we have two major cities, three if you want to count Green Bay. I personally don't. And it doesn't take too far when you're outside of those cities before you're in very rural areas. Like you leave Madison, where Em and I live, and it's farmland in rural country like instantly. And so, despite being only 45 minutes outside of Milwaukee, like McGuanago, it's a very rural area. And this gentleman was coming home one evening, and at the time he was living with his parents. And as he's driving home, he's talking on the phone with his friend, and he pulls into their driveway, which is kind of a longer gravel driveway, and then at the end it's got sort of a small parking lot almost where you could fit 4 or 5 cars. And he backs his van in like he always does. And since he was talking on the phone with his friend, he didn't want to go inside right away. Like, he doesn't want to wake his parents up or whatever, because, if he just barges in talking on the phone, that would be disruptive. And so he's outside finishing his conversation when he notices in the ambient light of this lamppost that they have at the end of their driveway, it's about 50 feet away. I actually measured it when we were out there. And it's the only light out there. Like there's no street lights or anything. There's barely any other houses, frankly. And so about 50 feet away, you have this lamppost, and it's lit up because it's nighttime. And in the ambient light from that, he can kind of see the outline of what looked like a huge person in front of his van all of a sudden. And, he turns the headlights on because at that point, he doesn't know that it's anything unusual necessarily, and to get a better look at him. And what he described was this huge, like 8-foot tall, sort of like snake-skinned or like reptilian-skinned being with these membranous wings, and it sort of had its wings wrapped around itself. Like if you picture a bat hanging upside down, how they wrap their wings around themselves. But it was standing there in front of him, maybe 10 feet in front of the van. And as this is happening, he is at a loss for words, frankly, for several seconds, and then he starts telling his friend about what he's seeing. And as he's doing that, then this thing, he described it as it sort of blurring and then disappears. So, he wasn't sure if that meant, after we talked about it, because, again, Emily and I went out there and talked to this guy, and he showed us where everything went down. And he wasn't sure if that meant that it had sort of like shot up in the air and just moved so quickly that, his eye couldn't track it, or if it literally just somehow disappeared, whether, like, whatever that means, And what really struck me about this case is when we were out there talking to this guy, we went out there and it was, late morning on a beautiful day, beautiful sunny day. And this guy, he was terrified. He was sweating bullets, telling this story, like visibly afraid because of this experience, and it's difficult to convey that to people. I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but when you try to relate that to people who only know these sightings through maybe like the reports we've written, it's you can't express in words what that kind of fear looks like on somebody's face and how it affects them. So that one really stuck with me. And then, of course, everything that happened in Woodstock in 2019. That was a fascinating case as well. We had a gentleman who sort of traditional to the narrative of these sightings was going out to run a mundane errand. He had to go to Walgreens, just a simple trip to the drugstore, and on his way home, it was just after 8 o'clock, I think, which is, since this happened in February, was well late enough for it to be dark outside. And as he's driving past the Dewfield Pond Conservation Area, this thing steps out in front of his car, and he catches it in his headlights, so he's able to see it as it crosses the street. Said it only took 2 or 3 steps to cross the street, and then it was gone. But he described it as this 7 or 8 foot tall hairy humanoid, but with these membranous like gargoyle wings. So like a bat-winged Bigfoot, I guess. And it walked across the street and went between this house and this line of decorative line of trees, and then it was gone. And this was another one where Emily and I went down there and we met this guy. We met his wife. We saw their house. They took us out to the area of the sighting and walked us around and showed us where everything happened. And I just can't for the life of me think of why they would have, or why he would have made this up, and it just doesn't make sense. It is so credible for me to go out there and meet people like these who clearly have experienced something outside of their normal reality, and when they welcome me into their house, they're not asking for anything. They're not interested in attention. They don't want fame or fortune or anything else. Like literally, they're just trying to make sense of these seemingly impossible experiences. And that stuck with me. Like those 2 cases specifically, like I've talked to plenty of other witnesses and been on site, other places, but those specifically, because of how close they were and the detail they got in their sightings and the effect that their sightings had on them. And then honestly, like when it comes to Woodstock, the associated phenomena that happened after, like we had other sightings. There was the sighting that happened in the parking lot. So basically after the original witness had his sighting, like the direction that he saw the creature going in actually led past this house into the McHenry County fairground. And so it wasn't too long after his sighting that we received another report from a gentleman who said that he had seen this creature in the fairground and that it had charged the fence while he was standing in this parking lot. And he said that he had called 911 and got the police involved. So naturally, of course, I filed a FOIA request because I'm like, all right, well, that would be great if this really happened. So let's see. And sure enough, the McHenry County Sheriff's Department, by the way, is one of the most helpful law enforcement offices anywhere that I've ever dealt with, because they got back to me in like 2 or 3 days. And they said, yeah, hey, we didn't have an official report file, like no crime was committed, but here's the incident detail report showing that this guy saw this thing and it scared him enough to call 911. So like we have that. We have this tangible piece of evidence, this official record that, during these sightings in Woodstock, yeah, this guy who said that he was scared enough to call 911 absolutely did. And then you've got other reports coming in from that area too that weren't able to be as investigated in depth, but it adds to the overall, I think, credibility to know then that there are other people who are also experiencing something weird. So yeah, I mean, McGuanago was great, but Woodstock, that was really something else.
Yeah, I kind of favored the close and personal ones, and there were a few of those, but the ones I thought were very interesting. Well, first of all, was the one in along Lakeshore Drive, and this is the one where the couple were from Washington D.C. and the gentleman he's an actual professional athlete, and anyway, they were at her mother's visiting her condominium, and they were actually walking in front of the condominium on Lakeshore Drive on their way back. It was about 9, a little after 9 in the evening, so it was dark. And as they were walking south, this being flew right in front of them, up over the trees and up the building, along the face of the building. And they watched this thing, and it literally stopped, hovered in midair, and was like it was looking through a window on one of the top floors. And then it arched back and started diving back towards the trees. And when it did that, they started running. They were scared to death. They didn't know what this thing was. And they were heading back towards the door, and I'm trying to think I think it was Schiller Avenue. And they were heading towards the door to the condo, and this thing literally ascended in front of them, and was actually hovering in midair about 2 to 3 foot off the pavement with its wings spread out and right in front of them. And they described it very similar to what everybody else has been saying. Very thin, dark body with that kind of looked like it had a wet look to it. And we've had those tar bodies reported to us also.
Rockford, yeah, both of those 2010 sightings.
And the wings were bat-like, with the membrane wings, which was spread out. But how it was hovering, who knows? It was vibrating, and in fact, they felt the vibration coming off this thing, and the legs and the feet, which apparently they was quite small, the feet, but they were vibrating, they were shaking. Had a very small head with 2 large eyes, and the eyes were red. And this thing was right in front of them and hovered about 10 to 15 seconds. She lost control of her legs and went down to the pavement. Now, there were other people around because they did notice a flash from a phone go off, so somebody tried to take a photo of it. As well, there was somebody, maybe a delivery guy, I don't know, but he had his van there, and he said something, and he jumped in his van and took off. But there were also other people mentioning it, saying things across the street. So when when she fell to the ground, this thing started to ascend very slowly up into the air, and that's the last they saw of it. And her husband had literally picked her up and carry her into the mother's condo. They called me the next morning. Now, they were supposed to leave out of Chicago that day, but she couldn't. She was afraid to fly, and in fact, they stuck around for another 2 days. But man, they were shook. That was really a frightening incident for them. And the other one was in Bolingbrook, Illinois, which is a suburb southwest of the city. This woman, she had a nightly routine of going out and walking about 10 o'clock at night. Safe neighborhood, nice town. But her complex where she lived at, there was a small playground there, and she usually cut through the playground, backed around, and walked on home. Well, as she was going through the playground, she was on the pavement, and she saw something tall standing there, which she thought originally were two people embracing. And when she got within, she said 15 foot of it, this thing turned a quarter turn and was very wide. But the wings, they did look membrane, but they were wrapped around the body. And she said this thing was tall. I mean, it was like 7 foot. And she said it was actually making a gurgling sound. I think it was sleeping, to be honest with you, but it was standing there, but she never saw any eyes or any of the facial features because this thing had the wings wrapped around it. Well, she of course was freaked out, and she tried to walk away from it, and her legs gave out on her. And her legs were very weak, and she had to find the nearest bench and sit down and regain her composure. At the same time, watching this thing, that she had just passed. She said after about 5 minutes, she got enough strength to get up and go around the playground to her home. So when she got home, she told her son he wanted to see it. They got in the car and they drove a couple blocks back to the playground. And when they got to the playground, this thing lunged out of the bush. He got a brief look at it, but he did see it. So and that was close and personal. When they got back home, they called me, and I mean, she was fit to be tied. I had problems even getting any information out of her first. So those were two very close encounters. I think probably the most frightening one, and you're familiar with this one as much as I am, Tobias, was Floyd Hancock.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that sighting?
Sure. I mean, that was, until recently, that was actually the earliest sighting chronologically that we had. So that was October 27th, 1969, and so you've got this guy, Floyd Hancock, who again is one of those people who was willing to put himself out there, willing to go on the record about his experience, and all the way back in 69, less than 2 years after the supposed end of the Point Pleasant sightings, you've got a guy in Indiana here, Rolling Prairie, yep, in Indiana, who was asleep in his family's trailer. So he's a child, obviously, and he's asleep in his trailer. He shares a room with his baby sister, and recently the family had some damage to their trailer. So they have a hole in the ceiling of the living room, in the roof of their living room, and so they've got a tarp over it. And he wakes up one night, and he said he was awakened by a strange noise and this disgusting smell, basically. And he wakes up and he looks over towards his sister's crib, and he sees this winged humanoid staring down at her. Interested in his sister, seemingly. And, he described this thing as being very tall, between 7 and 8 feet in height, which is pretty consistent with most reports. And, he said, it was tall enough that its posture was crouched, and which it makes sense if it was that tall in this trailer. And it had these huge leathery wings that were similar to either a bat or a gargoyle, again, which are words that people use, pretty commonly to describe these things' wings. And so he sees this thing, and it's thin. He described it as being almost skeletal, really, with these sharp teeth and dark eyes, and it makes this weird garbled sound. And he screams. He's a kid. Of course he screams. He's trying to get his parents' attention, and they don't respond. His grandmother, though, who's living with him, Like, she comes in, she hears him, she runs in, and she sees this thing and just immediately falls to her knees. Like, she's overcome by this experience. And so he's screaming, and this creature loses interest in his baby sister and comes over to Floyd, picks him up, goes into the living room, climbs out through this hole, which seems to obviously be where it came in. Like, that's how it gained access, and takes off. And all Floyd really remembers then is being very cold and wet, hearing his grandmother screaming as this thing takes off with him, and then that's it. Like, he blacks out, passes out, whatever. And he has no idea how long he was gone, but he only remembers, and after that, waking up in his bed with his panicked parents and his grandmother there. And, his parents thought that they had been, sort of stunned somehow, like put into this hypnotic state. And, of course, they didn't call the police or anything, because there are a couple issues here, really. I mean, one, what are you going to tell the police? Like, Floyd's back, right? So he's not kidnapped. He was brought back by this thing. And, I forgot to mention that. So he comes to find out later from his grandmother that there was a thump on the roof, and his dad goes up there and finds him. And that's how they found him and got him back. But, like, yeah, they don't call the police, because what are they going to tell him? Like, their kid's home. He's not kidnapped. There's no crime to report. Even in '69, people knew better than to want to really put themselves on the line, if they didn't have to, about a story that would sound like that. And beyond that, they lived in a trailer with a hole in the roof. I mean, there's probably an issue of poverty to be had. Where the police, especially back then, they probably didn't trust the police. There was no guarantee that the police were going to treat them particularly well, or believe their story. If they were scared enough to actually report a monster sighting. So, but again, it's another one where we've got somebody who feels very strongly, obviously, about what happened to him, and was willing to put himself out there, and you have to respect that. And he's got nothing to gain, and as is the case in a lot of these sightings, he's really reached a certain age where I think that it's not important to him what people think about him anymore. Like, I saw that with, like, David Ramos. I had another witness recently, Gerald Therese, where you just get to a certain age, maybe you're retired, you just don't care. It's like, look, I know what happened to me, and I don't have a career for anybody to ruin anymore. I'm older now; it doesn't matter. And so, people are willing to put themselves on the line. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's a good one.
So many aspects of that just screams abduction.
Yeah,
so much stuff. And I can attest from my own experiences, but so many things from that scream, what an abduction scenario would be. I know people getting immobilized, people being moved, people being, finding themselves waking up in strange places, where they know they didn't go to sleep. This could have been an abduction, and quite honestly, how many reports have we gotten before where people have said that Greys can shapeshift themselves?
David tells me that all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, he believes that. He believes that, and he's seen that. He said,
I've heard so many stories. I've had so many people who've had abduction experiences and said that growing up, there used to be a dog that used to look in the window. And they always thought it was a strange, just a friendly dog, Turns out to be a Grey that was a shapeshift itself. It's just so many different scenarios, and that kind of ties in with how do we not know it's extraterrestrial? It could be ultra-terrestrial. So,
well, I tell you, and I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but David Eckhart has told me on numerous occasions he believes these winged beings in Chicago are extraterrestrial at some point or some type. He really does. He doesn't know what they're possibly related to, where they'd come from, where they are in the hierarchy. If they're cooperative with other beings, but he does. He really believes that they are some type of either non-terrestrial, some type of extraterrestrial biological entity of some type. He's not sure, but he has a strong feeling about it.
Won't be the first time that we've had reports of entities that have wings. In fact, in Draconian, if you follow a lot of the, there's different species, supposedly reptilians have a hierarchy amongst themselves, and the higher ups, the ones that are considered the royalty, the nobility, have wings. They're called quote unquote Draconian.
Yeah, the Dracs. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so many different things. I mean, there's so many different scenarios that could play themselves out. I mean, this thing could be something that was ultra terrestrial. It was here way before us. Mm-hmm. It could be interdimensional. Mm-hmm. Especially, I point a lot to it with the Rosemont sighting that we took. She saw a blue light. And
yeah.
A lot of sightings where people have said these things have like warped into the room or warped out. They've always seen blue lights.
That's what David told me when I talked to him. And since we had an possible alien involvement, I asked him about it. And when I told him it flashed with a blue light, he told me that every portal and every transport that he has seen that have been shown to him always are associated with a blue light of some type.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is that related? I suppose it's possible. Yeah. Weird. Well, guys, anything else we need to cover on this? What haven't we covered? Well, I know there's a lot we haven't covered.
Oh boy, yeah, I was gonna say.
We've
written whole books of stuff.
Yeah, we've written books now about it.
Yeah.
Where
do you even start?
It's crazy. It's funny when this phenomenon first started gearing up in 2017, and I mentioned it to you guys, but the first thing. The media, when they started hearing about it, they started, because I was calling it the Chicago Phantom, and
I remember that.
The media started monitoring it as the Mothman, the Chicago Mothman. That's how that got started. We didn't do that, and that's what everybody was referring it to. So of course, when people in Chicago started hearing about the Mothman in Chicago, they started getting on Google and trying to figure out what a Mothman was, and invariably they read about Point Pleasant and the Harbinger of Doom thing, and of course the Silver Bridge and all that. So I tell you, in July and August of 2017 in particular, I was getting phone calls from just regular people in Chicago and in the environs who were deeply concerned that something was going to happen in Chicago. And I mean, I was getting phone calls. I had to cut my phone off at some point. I was getting phone calls, late at night, 24/7. And these weren't witnesses. These were people who actually were fearful that something had come into our world to tell us that something major was going to happen in Chicago. And the fear was definitely there. And of course, I'm trying to tamp this down and try to tell people, we have no evidence that this is going to cause anything or to be the result in anything. We're just reporting what people are telling us. Well, I read about the Mothman in Point Pleasant, what happened with the bridge and all that. Well, you and I both do not buy into that harbinger theory anyway.
I definitely don't. Yeah.
But so many things about this, and it doesn't take very much of a search to see that all the other sightings. You had the Blackbird of Chernobyl. You had the Fukushima reactor sighting. You had the sighting in Minnesota before the bridge collapse. So many things that have been reported and put out there, and people just start drawing their own conclusions. I've had people, ask, is this a sign that the new magic plot is going to finally slip and we're going to get hit? I was like, I'm not a seismologist. I'm not a geologist. I would not know, how this works. I know that it's happened and it will happen again. I mean, for all I know, a meteorite could come out of nowhere and hit us. And
right.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that this is what's happening. I mean,
Sure.
one of my theories is I don't know if you guys believe in the concept of the tulpa.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Thought is very strong, and it's Chicago is just a vast melting pot of so many people, so many races, so many different stories, and it's been a mecca for just ultra violence. I mean, it didn't earn the moniker Chirac for no reason at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
People are straight up having gunfights in the street. Funny story I read this morning. They're talking about, they're going to bring in the National Guard full time. It's like, yeah, great. Let's bring people in with heavy machine guns and deal with the people who are already shooting each other in the streets. But
they have a war.
Yeah, right.
There'd be a war breaking out on the streets so badly. Lately, we've been having problems with looting, mass looting, along with the protests. It's bad. But something tells me that this has been boiling, simmering just under the surface for so long that maybe all that negativity, all that energy is what either summoned it, kind of like basically chumming the water. This thing got attracted to it, or it manifested itself.
Right.
As a result of all this, it didn't help that people were out there, summoning it on, using, witchcraft or anything like that, for lack of a better word. But this area has just been, a powder keg.
Yeah.
With so many things, and just somebody sitting there just sparking the fuse until one day it's got lit, and we find ourselves in the present situation we're in now. I mean,
well, guys, I tell you what we're going to have to do eventually. I think when we start getting a smattering of cases again, we're going to have to come back and do this again on here,
Sure.
As well as the regular Fortean team coming on and talking. People seem to enjoy it. They're truly interested in what we're investigating, and I think they like these firsthand accounts. So again, I thank you guys for coming on the show, and I'm going to check into this sighting I got tonight. Maybe we got another one, so who knows. So you all take it easy. Have a good weekend. I'll be talking to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, you take care. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms and Monsters blog site. If you're interested in supporting Phantoms and Monsters and Arcane Radio, you can use the PayPal donation buttons on the blog and newsletter. Now, our new YouTube channel, Beyond Explanation, has new content being added daily, including Arcane Radio archived shows. Check it out and subscribe, please. I want to again thank Tobias, Wayland, and Manuel and Navarette for joining me this evening, and I want to thank you for listening to the show. Stay healthy, have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Good night.